Tonight on PBS News Weekend, a new escalation in the Middle East as Israel's retaliatory attack on Iran fuels fears of a wider war. Then, for the third presidential election in a row, Michigan is playing a pivotal role. And how doctors are using weight loss drugs to treat adolescents.
These medications work, and our children are really suffering from outcomes from excess weight, ranging from mental health and bullying to type 2 diabetes.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by and with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. And friends of the NewsHour. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm John Yang. Tonight, Iran is saying that it might not respond in kind to Israel's first ever open attack on its soil if there's a ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon. More than 100 Israeli fighter jets and unmanned drones struck Iranian military targets. Iran's state-run news agency said 4 members of its military were killed. The long-anticipated retaliatory attack came early Saturday morning. The Israeli Defense Forces said it struck targets where missiles are built and stored. Their answer to Iran's missile barrages on Israel in April and earlier this month. Those followed the killings of Iranian and Hezbollah leaders, which Iran blamed on Israel. On state TV, Iran's ruling regime played down the damage.
Although the country's integrated air defense system successfully tracked and confronted the act of aggression, limited damage has been caused to some places. The scope of the attack is being investigated.
IDF spokesman Daniel Hagari indicated Israeli retaliation was done, for now.
We are focused on the targets of the war in Gaza and Lebanon. Iran is the one that continues to push for a wider regional escalation. We will know how to choose additional targets and attack them if necessary.
International reaction was swift.
I wish a speedy recovery to our neighbor Iran and the Iranian government, which was the target of the Israeli aggression last night. The Zionist Israeli government wants to light the fuse on a regional conflict.
I am clear that Israel has the right to defend itself against Iranian aggression. I'm equally clear that we need to avoid further regional escalation and urge all sides to show restraint. Iran should not respond.
This afternoon, before flying to Pittsburgh for a campaign event, President Biden echoed that call.
It looks like they didn't hit anything other than military targets. My hope is this is the end.
A senior administration official said efforts will soon resume to end the fighting in Lebanon, secure a ceasefire in Gaza, and the return of Israeli hostages still held in Gaza. Suzanne Maloney is director of the Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. Suzanne, what do you make of this offer from or overture from Iran that they'll not retaliate if there's a ceasefire in Lebanon and Gaza?
Well, I think this is consistent with the rhetoric that we've heard from Iran for some time. They've tried to posture that they're actually defending the people of Gaza and the people of Lebanon, and that their hostile activity toward Israel will, in fact, stop if there is a ceasefire. I think it's also a face-saving gesture because they're unlikely to respond to what was a fairly complex and sophisticated attack by the Israelis yesterday against Iran.
Talk a little more about last night, the attack last night. Was Israel able to accomplish its goals while at the same time heeding the international calls for restraint?
Well, I think it was a sort of Goldilocks approach on the part of the Israelis. It was big enough to impose some costs and I think to have some deterrent impact on Iran's calculus, but it was not so big as to create inevitable pressures for escalation and Iranian retaliation, which would put the region in a much wider and much more dangerous war. That obviously was the goal of the United States that had been speaking with the Israeli counterparts about the nature of the attack. There was a lot of discussion about whether nuclear sites would be targeted, whether Iran's oil and gas infrastructure might be targeted, but instead they chose to target drone and missile production facilities as well as air defense and radar. And I think that that was a very wise and appropriate choice.
Israel appears to have used the airspace of Jordan and Iraq to get to the targets in Iran. What does that tell us about Iran's standing among its Arab neighbors?
Well, the region's reaction has been quite interesting. As you noted, two of Iran's neighboring states permitted the Israelis to use their airspace to undertake these attacks. It demonstrates how vulnerable Iran is because of the alignment of many of the countries in the rest of the region with Israel. But of course, there were condemnations for many regional states as well, including Saudi Arabia, which I think speaks to the fact that no country in the region really wants to see this situation escalate further than it has.
There's been, for many years, Israel and Iran sort of fighting by proxy. The Iranian-sponsored groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis attacking Israel. Have we reached a new phase now where these two countries, these two long-time enemies, are going to be attacking each other directly?
Yes, I think that's exactly where we were. As you noted, for about the past decade, there's been a gray zone war between Iran and Israel, often involving proxies or war in third countries such as Syria. What we've seen since April is a willingness on the part of the Iranians to strike directly in an attributable fashion against Israel, and by Israel to respond directly with attacks on the Iranian homeland. I think this is a much more dangerous phase of the war, although the actions of the past 24 hours may create some pause on the part of the Iranians to take the next step of escalation.
Much more dangerous phase. Does this, you think, take us, are we a step closer? Are we closer to having a broader war in the Middle East?
We are absolutely on the precipice of a broader war, and the only thing that will really ensure that we don't get there is to see a ceasefire in Gaza, a reduction of tensions around the region, and a commitment on the part of Iran and other countries to stop trying to fuel the fire and trying to press their aggression against Israel. I think the likelihood that we get there very quickly, unfortunately, is very low.
Suzanne Maloney, the Brookings Institution, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are developments on Israel's other battlefronts. The Lebanese Health Ministry says that more than 1 million people have been driven from their homes since fighting began there. Israel says it's defending against Hezbollah rockets launched from Lebanon. And in northern Gaza, Israeli troops withdrew from a hospital where the Palestinian Health Ministry says they held medical staff and patients without access to food or water. In Ukraine, Russian drones struck Kyiv in an hours-long nighttime barrage. Ukrainian officials said one went into an apartment building, killing a 15-year-old girl and injuring 5 others. And in central Ukraine, a missile struck a residential area in Dnipro. Regional officials said a 14-year-old and 4 others were killed and at least 21 others injured. Police in London were out in force today as anti-immigrant protesters and anti-discrimination demonstrators held competing rallies. Thousands of opponents of immigration took to the streets in a march called Unite the Kingdom. Nearby, anti-racism campaigners held a counter-protest. Immigration's been a flashpoint since July when days of riots spread across the country, targeting asylum seekers and mosques. Still to come on PBS News Weekend, what the presidential candidates are saying to voters in the electoral battleground of Michigan, and how doctors are using weight loss drugs to tackle obesity in young people.
This is PBS News Weekend from the David M. Rubenstein studio at WETA in Washington, home of the PBS NewsHour, weeknights on PBS.
Today's the first day of statewide early voting in Michigan, and both presidential candidates are in the state trying to energize their supporters. Former President Donald Trump's in Novi, which is a suburb of Detroit.
Year after year, globalist politicians like Kamala Harris sold you out and let other countries loot and pillage and plunder your wealth.
Vice President Kamala Harris is on the other side of the state, pressing her message that reproductive rights are at stake in the election.
2 years ago. We are seeing the impact of these laws causing clinics, healthcare clinics, to shut down. The physicians that I've been talking with are concerned about this myriad of issues that have highlighted the fact that because of Trump and what he did with the Supreme Court, we are looking at a healthcare crisis in America.
Tonight, she'll be in Kalamazoo with former First Lady Michelle Obama. Earlier, I asked Chad Livengood, the Detroit News politics editor and columnist, to tell us about the race for Michigan's 15 electoral votes.
This race is neck and neck, and there's no clear front runner in Michigan right now. Kamala Harris is spending Saturday with former First Lady Michelle Obama in Kalamazoo, a university town, Western Michigan University. She needs to do really well in these university towns in Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti and Mount Pleasant and of course East Lansing as well, because this is where she's going to need to run the score up to counter some of Trump's advantages in working class areas of the state.
Former President Trump today is in Oakland County, which is a Detroit suburb. What does that tell us about who he's trying to motivate?
Yeah, he's trying to get the core Republican base of Oakland County to get them out and get them to vote early. This is his strategy has definitely turned towards trying to mirror the Democrats' strategy in previous elections to try to bank as many early votes between absentee votes by mail and also early in-person voting.
The Michigan economy, of course, still built around the auto industry of internal combustion engines. This shift to electric vehicles, how's each campaign dealing with that issue?
I mean, Donald Trump has honed in on this subject with very tight specific issues, going after EVs, essentially saying to people, your big three automakers should not be trying to compete with China. I mean, he went into Flint, Vehicle City, the birthplace of General Motors, and made this message about a month ago. And he's continued to talk about it and really rail against electric vehicles. And Kamala Harris is trying to basically counter and say, hey, look, we want to compete with China. And if we want to compete with China in the automotive industry, we have to make electric vehicles.
Another distinctive feature about Michigan politics is the large Arab American population, sort of concentrated around Detroit. Early on, when President Biden was still in the race, there was a lot of unhappiness among that community about his staunch support for Israel in the war in Gaza. Now that Harris is in the race, how has that community approached her? What are they thinking about Harris?
That unhappiness has not eased, and it has maybe even grown more frustrated as the war in Gaza has dragged on, and now Israel has been bombing in Lebanon, and there's a large Lebanese population, particularly in Wayne County, Dearborn Heights, Hamtramck, that are furious. And so this is the real big jump ball, I think, for Democrats, and maybe even the crisis. They don't really quite know how big it will be. There are some leaders in the community, like the mayors of Hamtramck and Dearborn Heights, who have endorsed Trump. And just yesterday, the mayor of Dearborn came out and said he can't vote for either one of them.
I mean, could that also affect the Senate race? You've got the Democrats trying to hold on to the seat that Debbie Stabenow is stepping down from. You have a current Democratic House member, Alyssa Slotkin, running against a former Republican House member, Mike Rogers. Could that affect that race as well?
Oh, absolutely. They are both pretty hawkish, pretty pro-Israel. They are on paper, from a national security perspective, the exact same candidate. He used to be an FBI agent. She used to be a CIA agent. She worked in the Obama Defense Department. Now, whether she gets penalized by the Arab and Muslim voters of the state for it is kind of what is sort of the big unknown right now.
The Democrats in Michigan are also trying to hold on to 2 open House seats, including the one that Slotkin is giving up. And both those races are toss-ups, or rated as toss-ups. Tell us about those races.
This is a race between Tom Barrett, the Republican who lost to Slotkin by 3 or 4 points 2 years ago. And Curtis Hertel Jr., who is a Democrat and longtime politician in Michigan. And this is a race that's neck and neck. It's another race where the electric vehicle transition is definitely on the ballot. Lansing is an auto town, it has 2 GM plants. And the future of one of those plants is pretty much in doubt right now. Democrats are trying to use this as an issue to say, hey, look, if you elect Tom Barrett or Donald Trump, this plant this Cadillac plant is in serious danger of closing. And then over to the east of there is the 8th congressional district, and that's the seat long held by Dan Kildee. This is a seat where they've got a Democratic state senator, Kristen McDonald-Rivet, running against a Republican entrepreneur, Paul Young. This is also a seat that's neck and neck, and they're also out there battling over the EV transition. And the messaging that you're seeing from Trump to Young on down is, if we continue to transition to EVs, all these little plants that make components for gas engines and transmissions are going to go by the wayside. And so it's going to be a real big test about that messaging really motivates voters to go pull the lever for the Republicans.
A lot of races to watch in Michigan on election night. Chad Livengood of the Detroit News. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for having me, John.
Physicians are increasingly using weight loss drugs to treat obesity, diabetes, and other chronic conditions in young people, including children. In the last 3 years, the number of people aged between 12 and 25 using drugs like Wegovy and Ozempic has surged nearly 600%. Ali Rogan looks at the high demand for these drugs and the concerns surrounding them.
Approximately 1 in 5 children and adolescents in the U.S. is obese. But experts say early intensive treatment can prevent health issues down the line. Early last year, the American Academy of Pediatrics recommended the use of medication to treat obesity in children ages 12 and up. We spoke to 2 young women who have been using these medications.
I had been struggling with my weight, and I had never gotten my period before, and we weren't sure what was up with it. And I had taken some labs, and we found out that I had PCOS. I think a lot of people think, especially with PCOS, that they're stuck and there isn't options, and they're finding out that this is an option because it has helped me lose almost 90 pounds, and I got my period, and it's helped with my confidence and so many other things. And continuing it, I think, has just shown the effectiveness of it as well.
I had tried working out and stuff like that, but nothing was showing helpful, or there was no change at all in anything. And so it was just kind of hard and disappointing. And the only thing that actually helped with all of it was the medication. My appetite is has changed completely. And it's been suppressed so much. I think the end goal is ultimately to get me off of it, because I don't want to be taking it forever. And if we can we've been lowering the dosages, so if we can slowly get me off of it and everything kind of stays normal, and or if anything things get better and not worse, then that's good.
Despite the effectiveness of these drugs, some doctors are concerned about the lack of data available for children using them long term. Dr. Melanie Cree is a pediatric endocrinologist at Children's Hospital Colorado, and she treated both Sophie and Autumn. Dr. Cree, thank you so much for joining us. First of all, why are we seeing this increase of children using these medications?
The reason we're seeing such an increase is that these medications work, and our children are really suffering from outcomes from excess weight, ranging from mental health and bullying to the development of serious metabolic disease, such as type 2 diabetes.
When you're treating patients, what sort of options do you consider before looking at medication?
So we always look at lifestyle in terms of trying to help a child who's struggling with weight achieve better health. And we can look at different aspects of food. Are they getting enough fruits and vegetables, cutting down on simple carbohydrates, really cutting liquid calories? What can they do to increase their activity? Is their neighborhood safe to exercise in? Do they have access to facilities or sports? Sleep is very important. Do they have somewhere quiet to sleep? Do they get enough sleep? And then obviously, mental health is very important. And are they stressed, or are they living in a difficult social environment? And helping align all of these to optimize children's health is something that we do prior to trying any medication.
What are some of the misconceptions that you've encountered about prescribing these medications and the children who are on them?
I think the number one misconception is that the individual is failing somehow, that somebody has to do these medications if they don't have a strong enough willpower, and that they're weak and can't do this on their own. And that's just absolutely not true. These are chemicals. And when you take chemicals and they help you lose weight, that means that you've got a problem with the chemicals in your brain that are helping you to regulate how you sense appetite and how you sense fullness. And so you take these medications and they actually change the way that your brain senses food.
Like we talked about earlier, there are concerns about the lack of long-term information on the use of these in children. What are your concerns there?
Many. There's a very, very low risk of increased thyroid cancer for the duration of time that we've studied these medications and for animals' entire lives. But humans live much longer. So I think that's one of the biggest things that we're automatically watching for. Something that one of my research partners is interested in is how do these medications affect the brain differently when we're an adolescent with a developing brain compared to an adult who doesn't have a developing brain and brain that's changing so much. If you use this medication all through your teens, does that permanently change how your brain senses food?
In the patients that you've been seeing as they get older, do you recommend for them to stay on these medications over the long term, well into adulthood? What does that tend to look like?
You know, we've got patients that have come down 80, 90 pounds. We're now at ideal goal weight. And what do? We've done a really good job of figuring out how to start it, how to keep people healthy on it, increase protein and really increase activity. And then we get to goal weight. The data in adults show that if you don't lose at least 15% of your weight on semaglutide, when you stop, a year later, you're back up to your starting weight. I've been trying with a couple patients to switch them from the injectables when they get to target weight to pills that we have a little bit more safety data on. But right now, this is exactly what we're doing, trial and error with my patients and all of us in the woods together.
And what about the insurance question? There are concerns that companies won't want to support the long-term usage of these drugs in children as they get older. I know that this is uncharted territory in many ways, but what are the possible issues there?
Well, what we're having a problem with is when they get to their goal weight, then the insurance companies are renewing their approvals and saying, well, this individual isn't obese. We're not going to pay for the medication anymore. And they're that way because we were using the medication. So that is exactly the hurdle that we're facing right now. If we can prevent type 2 diabetes in kids, the economic effect is going to be dramatic within the next 15 years. It's very hard, and our healthcare system is not set up around prevention, but we really need to come up with pediatric models to model and say, okay, well, what is the cost if a patient develops type 2 diabetes as a teenager? What are you looking at in the next 20 years? Pregnancy complications for youth who have excess weight and then have babies in their 20s are much higher. So there are a lot of costs that are much higher, but putting all of that together to make the drug company right now pay for it is a little bit challenging.
Dr. Melanie Cree with Children's Hospital Colorado, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that is PBS News Weekend for this Saturday. I'm John Yang. For all of my colleagues, thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow.
Major funding for PBS News Weekend has been provided by
Consumer Cellular. This is Sam. How may I help you? This is a pocket dial. Well, somebody's pocket. Thought I'd let you know that with Consumer Cellular, you get nationwide coverage with no contract. That's kind of our thing. Have a nice day.
and with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you. The final night of an extraordinary campaign. Will voters send Donald Trump back to the White House?
We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years.
Or will Kamala Harris make history?
Are you ready to make your voices heard?
A PBS News special, Election 2024, Tuesday, November 5th at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 Central.
You're watching PBS.